Magic Johnson. That name is etched in history as one of the greatest athletes America has ever produced. Born in Lansing, Michigan, he rose from the impoverished streets to become a global basketball legend. In the Los Angeles Lakers jersey, Magic was not just a player. He was the soul of the Showtime era, where basketball transformed into art, where his magic passes left the world in awe. 5 NBA championships, 3 MVP awards, 12 All-Star appearances, and countless assist records propelled him to the pinnacle of the Hall of Fame. Beyond the court, Magic became a cultural icon, a symbol of the American dream. From a poor boy to a billionaire, a savvy investor, and co-owner of the Dodgers, Sparks, LAFC, and Commanders. He became a role model for generations of athletes, not just winning on the court but conquering the world beyond, creating value for the community, and living as an enduring icon. Yet, behind that radiant smile and dazzling glory lay a tragedy few could imagine. In 1991, at the peak of his career, Magic shocked the world by announcing he was HIV positive, a global bombshell, a death sentence in the eyes of society at the time. The world was shaken. Teammates distanced themselves. Public skepticism and prejudice piled on, turning him into an outcast. The days that followed were no longer about NBA Finals but a battle, hour by hour, against the disease and loneliness. He had to live with lifelong medication, face the constant fear of death, and watch friends and teammates succumb to the same illness while carrying the guilt of being a survivor. The glory vanished, leaving only a man engulfed by darkness. And from there, a haunting question emerged. Could fame, wealth, and a storied career help Magic Johnson escape this fated darkness, or would he forever live with an unhealable pain? Born in the summer of 1959 inches, Lansing, Michigan, Irvin Johnson Jr. didn't enter the world under a star's light, but in the shadows of poverty and the struggles of a working-class family. His father, Irvin Sr., toiled all day at an auto factory and woke early each morning to drive a garbage truck around the city. His mother, Christine, worked as a janitor at a school, quietly cleaning classrooms to earn a little extra income. Their home was modest, with little to boast of except love, but even that love couldn't shield the boy from the cruelty of the world outside. As a young child, Irvin often joined his father on garbage runs. It wasn't a choice, but a duty to ease his parents' burden. To other kids, though, the image of a scrawny black boy clutching trash bags held no noble meaning. They mocked him, calling him the vicious nickname Garbage Man, the trash boy. Those taunts cut deep into his tender heart, turning his childhood into a string of days filled with shame. He knew his father was a strong, honest man whose work fed the family, but the ridicule and scornful looks from peers clung to him. Each morning at school, instead of joy, he carried the fear of being called out, of being met with mocking stares. Though his parents showered their children with boundless love, the harsh truth was that poverty and societal prejudice left deep scars on Irvin's soul. The young boy began to wonder, was his worth tied only to the trash bags his father hauled? Could someone like him ever break free from this cycle of contempt? In the quiet Lansing nights, the boy clung tightly to a basketball, as if holding on to a grand secret of his life. To Irvin, the ball wasn't just a game. It was his only escape, a world where he was heard and recognized. When the ball bounced on the concrete, he was no longer Garbage Man, but a free, strong boy who could soar above the taunts and surpass the disdainful glances. That ball was his only friend that didn't mock him, a mirror reflecting a different future where Irvin could prove to the world that he had value, that he was more than the son of a garbage worker. So, every morning before the city woke, he quietly went to the court, sweat soaking his shirt, eyes blazing through the mist. With every shot, every sprint, he poured in his pain, his fear, and his fragile hope that one day he'd be seen not for his roots, but for his talent. Lansing may have been poor and his peers cruel, but in that boy's heart, something grand was taking shape. a burning desire to escape the darkness. And that desire, along with the soul-deep scars from years of being belittled, would become the fuel, the drive, for Magic Johnson to rise from a mocked child to an immortal legend. From the concrete courts of Lansing, Irvin Johnson's hunger to escape poverty grew stronger with each passing year. The garbage man boy of old was now a tall young man, eyes blazing and hands seemingly made to grip that orange ball. When he stepped into Michigan State University, Magic Johnson carried with him all the burning dreams of his childhood and the unhealed wounds of his heart. There, he found a new stage, a chance to prove to the world that he wasn't just the poor kid who was mocked but a star ready to explode. In 1979, the NCAA championship game between Michigan State and Indiana State became a defining moment. On that court, Magic Johnson faced Larry Bird, the stoic white kid from Indiana, who would become his greatest rival. All of America watched that battle, not just for the national title, but because it was a clash of two worlds, a black kid from struggling Lansing against a white icon from rural America, tense, dramatic, and laden with meaning beyond sports. The game ended with victory for Magic and Michigan State. That day, a star was born. From a child mocked by peers, Irvin Johnson became a name America chanted. The spotlight shone on his face, and for the first time, people no longer saw Garbage Man, but Magic, basketball's miracle, a symbol of hope and ambition. But behind that victory, behind the smiles and cheers, another path opened, one of pressure, of unseen loneliness. When hailed as the man who brings magic, Magic suddenly became the center of every gaze. People began expecting him to always win, always shine, always bring joy. For a young man in his early 20s, that burden wasn't easy. In the quiet nights after the bright lights, he often wondered, was he truly worthy? Could he carry the weight of a nation's dreams and expectations? The light, too bright at times, could also cast shadows, and Magic, in the moments of greatest praise, felt an emptiness within. From that day, his life turned a new page, a journey where glory and loneliness walked hand in hand, where each victory left an invisible scar, where the louder the praise, the deeper the solitude. The 1,979 championship made him a legend, but it also bound him to the fate of an icon, where the real man had to hide behind the glow of fame. Stepping out from the NCAA glory of 1,979, Magic Johnson had little time to savor the triumphs of youth. He quickly entered a far harsher world, the NBA, where expectations and pressures dwarfed anything he had faced in that fateful championship game against Larry Bird. The Los Angeles Lakers selected Magic as the #1 pick in the 1979 draft. The day he arrived in the city of neon lights, where Hollywood and the sports stage merged, his career officially embarked on an epic saga. Standing at 6'9", with a lithe frame and an extraordinarily creative mind, Magic was more than a player. He redefined the point guard position. In just one season, he transformed the Lakers into a theatrical troupe, where every game was a spectacular performance, every pass a melody, and every fast break a lightning bolt that electrified the arena. They called it the Showtime Lakers, a dazzling era centered on Magic Johnson's indelible smile. Throughout the 1,980 seconds, Magic led the Lakers to 5 championships: 1,980, 1,982, 1,985, 1,987, 1,988, earned 3 MVP awards, and continually shattered the boundaries of basketball. Fans worldwide were captivated by his fast-paced play, his jaw-dropping no-look passes, and his seemingly impossible yet perfectly precise assists. Alongside Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and James Worthy, he turned the Lakers into a storm that swept away all opponents, a cultural icon not just in sports but in American social life. Magic became a global figure, gracing magazine covers, appearing on television, and standing on every stage America built for its idols. But that blinding spotlight didn't just illuminate, it scorched. Behind the roars of thousands of fans, behind the gleaming championship trophies, was a man growing increasingly exhausted. The NBA's grueling schedule, the pressure to always shine, and the relentless media attention stripped Magic of his peace. Some nights, he left the court with his body drained, legs heavy as lead, yet he still had to flash that radiant smile for the fans. When the lights dimmed and the crowds dispersed, he sat alone in the locker room, sweat still damp, heart weighed down. All greatness comes at a cost, and Magic knew that better than anyone. He became a superstar, but also a prisoner of the very glory he created. Everyone wanted to see Magic win, to see Magic smile, but few knew that behind that smile were chronic back pains, eyes darkened by sleeplessness, and long nights wrestling with loneliness. In the spotlight, there was no room for weakness, no room for collapse. And so, Magic, once a young man driven by a hunger to escape poverty, now bore a new burden, the weight of endless expectations. An entire nation placed its faith in him, but that also meant he was no longer himself. Endless flights, brutal games, relentless interviews, all formed a vortex he couldn't escape. The cost of glory wasn't just a tired body, but a restless soul. At times, in the cold confines of a hotel room, he looked in the mirror and asked, "Is this really what I wanted? Does anyone see the exhaustion behind this smile?" Showtime made Magic a legend, but it also made him the loneliest man on the stage. He always had to be the brightest light, and because of that, he was never allowed to flicker. Dream Team 1992. Two words forever etched in global sports history, and at the center of that radiant picture was Magic Johnson. After fiery years with the Lakers, after 5 championships, and an undeniable superstar status, he stepped onto an even bigger stage where the eyes of the entire planet were watching. Barcelona 1992, the first time the U.S. assembled all its NBA stars in one lineup. Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, and Magic Johnson. The man who had just endured the HIV shock but still returned, standing among them as a symbol of strength and hope. The world celebrated him. When Magic donned the U.S. team's number 15 jersey, his smile was radiant, as if the disease was merely a passing breeze. On the court, every pass he made set the arena ablaze. Every shot sent fans to their feet cheering. To millions of fans, he was living proof of the American spirit, unyielding, brilliant, and immortal. Yet behind that smile, behind the blazing eyes before the cameras, Magic hid the cracks in his soul that no one could see. He knew he was no longer the carefree Magic of old, but an icon, a black hero in the public's eyes, carrying enormous expectations. America and the world didn't just want to see him win, they demanded he always be strong, always perfect, always an invincible role model. But who could always be perfect? Who could battle a disease still seen as a death sentence, carry the legacy of the black community, and maintain the image of an optimistic, radiant superstar? In the moments of roaring applause, his heart ached, not from the disease but from the loneliness fame created. The truth was, Magic Johnson always felt trapped in his own glory. Every public appearance required him to wear that smile, to appear unyielding, while deep inside were sleepless nights filled with anxiety, wondering if he'd live to see his wife and children tomorrow. He was both a source of pride and a mirror for millions to follow, but also a prisoner of unrelenting expectations. As a successful black man in America, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was forced to be proof that a black person could reach glory, could overcome prejudice, and that burden, more than the grueling games, wore down his soul. His dream team teammates saw only the magic of smiles and artistic passes, but the real Magic spent many nights alone in hotel rooms, quietly thinking about death, about the children who might lose their father, about a strong but fearful cookie. Barcelona 1000. 992 elevated Magic Johnson to the pinnacle of iconhood, but it also locked him in an invisible cage, where every eye was watching, where he wasn't allowed to be weak, where the radiant glory became the chains of a soul cracking day by day. The 7th of November 1991, a day not just American basketball but the entire world would never forget. Hundreds of reporters crowded into a press conference room in Inglewood, California, all awaiting a major announcement from the man who had led the Los Angeles Lakers to 5 championships and turned the NBA into a global phenomenon. When Magic Johnson stepped out, still in a sharp suit, still with that familiar smile on his lips, no one could imagine that in just a few minutes, sports history would take a different turn. He slowly took the microphone, his eyes betraying a slight tremble, then spoke in a low but calm voice. "Because I have tested positive for the HIV virus, I will retire from the NBA today." In that moment, the room fell silent. Cameras stopped flashing, pens stopped scribbling, and the world seemed to stop breathing. An icon of health, a giant with an endless smile, a star at the peak of his career, now sentenced to death by a disease society still viewed as imminent doom. The news spread faster than any pass Magic had ever thrown. Within hours, every major newspaper and TV broadcast ran blazing red headlines. Magic Johnson tests positive for HIV. At the time, HIV was synonymous with fear, prejudice, and harsh judgment. It was called the killer disease, the disease of shame. And now, the NBA's brightest icon had become the face of that fear. Teammates who once embraced him in victory began to keep their distance. Some feared a single scratch on the court could transmit the disease. Some avoided touching him, avoided sharing the locker room. Friends drifted away. Handshakes became awkward. Conversations dwindled. The hero of America suddenly became a cursed outcast. Behind the flashing cameras of the press, behind the sympathetic words aired on TV, was a quiet rejection, a cold caution that Magic felt keenly in every moment. He kept that smile on his face that day, a brave smile to reassure the world. But no one knew that when the press conference doors closed, when the noise outside faded, Magic Johnson sat alone in his black car, head in his hands, and wept. Not the tears of a superstar stripped of his career, but the tears of a man who believed he was counting down his final days. In 1991, HIV meant death, swift, brutal, and inescapable. Those nights that followed, when the house lights went out, Magic lay still in bed, unable to sleep. In the darkness, he could hear his heartbeat pounding like a countdown clock. He thought of Cookie, his young, pregnant wife. He thought of the child soon to be born, wondering if it would ever know its father. He thought of his aging parents, who had sacrificed their lives for him, now forced to watch their seemingly invincible son become a patient. And he thought of death, not as a distant concept but as a visitor knocking at his door each night. Outside, America still chanted Magic's name, still called him a hero, but behind closed doors, he was just a man trembling before fate. He recalled his childhood days, being called garbage man, mocked for his poverty. Back then, he swore to prove his worth through basketball, and he had done it. He had conquered the world. But now, all that glory seemed meaningless in the face of a blood test result. All the money, fame, and championships couldn't buy him one more day of peace. Some nights, Magic got out of bed, stepped into the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and cried in silence. The sound of rushing water masked his sobs, ensuring no one in the house could hear. Those tears carried the despair of a man who believed he had reached his final limit. He was no longer the invincible Magic Johnson. He was just Irvin, a black man, an HIV patient, a pariah in society's eyes. The 7th of November 1991 carved a scar in his heart that would never heal. It wasn't just the day he retired from basketball. It was the day he entered a life-or-death battle with prejudice, loneliness, and the fear of death. The world saw a brave Magic Johnson, smiling, reassuring. But only he knew that behind that smile were endless, sleepless nights, where he cried alone, waiting for death to knock at any moment. When Magic Johnson walked away from that fateful press conference, the world was stunned. But few understood that the deepest pain didn't lie in the headlines. It was silently tearing apart the heart of the woman standing behind him, Cookie. At the time Magic announced his HIV diagnosis, Cookie was pregnant with their first child. Those should have been the happiest months of a woman's life, preparing for motherhood, dreaming of a complete family. Instead, she was thrown into a nightmare no words could describe. In the early days after the devastating news, Cookie nearly collapsed. She looked at the husband she loved wholeheartedly, the man whose smile had captivated her since their college days, now facing a death sentence. Beyond that, she lived in paralyzing fear. Was she carrying the virus too? Would the unborn child in her womb face a cruel fate before even being born? Those were long nights when she stayed awake, clutching her belly and crying, praying for a miracle. The outside world was harsh. People whispered, gossiped. Some said Cookie would leave Magic. Others, more cruel, sneered that she had ruined her life by staying with a philandering man and suffering the consequences. Those malicious words stabbed deep into the young woman's heart. But she chose silence, held her husband's hand tightly, and stood by him. Cookie could have walked away. No one would have blamed her for leaving a man carrying a deadly disease, but she didn't. She chose to stay, to love, to sacrifice. And then, the test results became a saving miracle. Cookie tested negative. The child in her womb, baby EJ, tested negative too. In that moment, it was as if a mountain lifted from her shoulders. She cried, no longer out of fear but out of gratitude, out of faith that love and miracles still existed. Yet, even though the virus didn't claim her or her child's life, it left invisible scars. They had to live under society's suspicious gazes, endure vicious rumors, and learn to step past prying looks whenever they appeared in public together. Cookie faced painful questions time and again. How can you stay with him? Aren't you afraid? But her response was always a dignified silence. In Cookie's heart, love wasn't about fleeing when the storm hit. It was about holding hands to weather it together. That choice made her the pillar, the anchor that kept Magic from completely falling apart. If HIV was the darkness swallowing Magic Johnson, Cookie was the flickering but steadfast light, guiding him through the darkest days. And the child born safely, baby EJ, was not just a family's joy but a symbol of a miracle. Even in the cruelest darkness, proud seeds of life could still bloom. Yet the cost of that choice was immense. Cookie sacrificed her carefree youth, lived with constant fear, and stood resilient against not only her husband's disease, but also society's prejudice. Every step she took was scrutinized. Every smile bore a pain no one could fathom. And from that, their love was no longer just a romance. It became a testament to the extraordinary power of loyalty, sacrifice, and a forgiving heart. Cookie turned a painful choice into an immortal declaration. Even when the world turned its back, she stayed, making her love the only medicine that kept Magic's will to live alive. Family, for many, a haven of peace. But for Magic Johnson, it was also a place rocked by storms that left his heart cracked time and again. After Cookie chose to stay and EJ was born in a miracle, it seemed things might settle into calm, but fate never gave him an easy path. Magic's eldest son, Andre Johnson, born in 1981 to Melissa Mitchell before Magic met Cookie, grew up mostly with his mother, only seeing his father during the summers. From a young age, Andre felt an invisible distance from Magic, a gap that neither basketball glory nor vast wealth could bridge. While Magic was consumed with the Lakers and Hollywood's dazzling lights, Andre often felt left behind. Though his father loved him, that constant absence left a lingering scar in the heart of his eldest son. And Magic, deep down, always carried a gnawing guilt. He could be a hero to all of America but had never been a complete father to his first child. E.J. Irvin Johnson III was born like a miracle amid the HIV nightmare, but he brought Magic another challenge, no less daunting. When E.J. came out as gay in 2013, the world turned its eyes on the Johnson family. For a man raised in the harsh world of sports, carrying the image of America's masculine icon, Magic had to wrestle with his own prejudices to learn to accept his son. He admitted to feeling confused, even disappointed at first, not because his son was unworthy of love, but because he feared society would treat E.J. as cruelly as it had treated him when he announced his HIV diagnosis. But fatherly love prevailed. Magic learned to listen, to stand by his son, and ultimately became E.J.'s strongest support. The image of a father with his arm around his flamboyantly dressed son, confidently facing the public, sent a powerful message: love knows no gender, and family is the safest place to be one's true self. Elisa, the adopted daughter, was not spared from turmoil either. Taken in by Magic and Cookie at 3 days old, Elisa grew up surrounded by love, but life tested the Johnson family's peace once more. In 2018, Elisa and her friends endured a terrifying home invasion. Strangers stormed in, violence erupted, and the young girl narrowly escaped death. The ordeal left scars, both physical and emotional. For Magic, that memory was like a recurring nightmare. He had lived with the fear of losing his own life, and now he had to watch his adopted daughter nearly lose hers to life's cruelty. In the days after the incident, he spent hours by her side, listening to her fears, holding her tightly as if his embrace could shield her from all dangers outside. The Johnson family, therefore, was never just about glamorous red carpet photos or radiant smiles at holiday gatherings. Behind them were cracks, struggles, tears, and pain that seemed insurmountable. Andre carried the distance, E.J. faced societal prejudice, Elisa narrowly escaped death. All were daggers in a father's heart. But it was through these trials that family became the anchor that lifted Magic after each fall. Cookie remained steadfast by her husband. The children, despite their different paths and circumstances, were the light that showed him the true value of life lay not on the court, not in multi-million-dollar deals, but in the enduring love that binds a home. And that love kept Magic Johnson standing, so that whenever the world called him a legend, he knew that behind him was a family, stormy, yet always his only harbor. After all the storms in his family, Magic Johnson still had to face an even greater obsession, a shadow that clung to him with every breath: death. In the early 1990s, HIV divided by AIDS was not just a disease, it was a death sentence that society branded onto anyone carrying the virus. People whispered, shunned, and feared as if a mere touch could bring them down. The media called HIV the killer disease, and those infected were looked at no differently than the walking dead. In poor Black communities and the LGBT community, where medical knowledge was limited and stigma pervasive, people fell one by one. Friends Magic knew, faces that once laughed and stood on stages or in studios, passed away in succession. Funerals followed funerals. Some were barely in their 30s, others hadn't yet reached their dreams. Names, laughter, gazes vanished as if they had never existed. And Magic, amidst that sea of loss, was still alive. But surviving was its own tragedy. He began to feel the guilt of the survivor, a pain too complex to name. Why me? Why am I still here when my friends, my brothers, are gone forever? Each time he heard of another acquaintance lost to AIDS, it was like another cut to his heart. He once shared that he spent many nights sitting alone in the dark, recalling faces, voices, and feeling as if those souls surrounded him, asking the same question: why are you still here when we're not? That question haunted him to the point of exhaustion. Each morning, Magic took a moment to gather himself. He placed a hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat, his breath, and then the question echoed in his mind, "Is today my last day?" He lived like a man on a countdown, each passing day not a gift but a slow tolling of a death knell. Nightmares came relentlessly. He dreamed of collapsing on the court, of Cookie and his children sobbing by his hospital bed, of the crowds that once cheered him now turning away, leaving only cold darkness. Those dreams woke him in cold sweats, and he would sit for hours staring into the mirror, wondering if he had the strength to face another day. At 32, when life should have been opening its grandest doors, Magic had to learn to live like a man awaiting death. He saw caution in his colleagues' eyes, fear in society's, and helplessness in his own. HIV turned him from an invincible icon into a frail man, from a hero into a cursed outcast. Behind the forced optimistic smiles on television, behind the powerful speeches, was a trembling man in a dark room, unsure if he'd wake the next morning. The bitter truth was, the more famous he was, the lonelier he became. All of America knew he had HIV, but few knew he cried every night. Friends faded away. Teammates kept their distance. Even those who once stood by his side grew wary. Magic understood that this disease didn't just kill the body, it killed a person's connection to the world around them. And so, though he lived, he felt himself dying, piece by piece. In those years, Cookie and his children were the lifeline holding him together. But even their love couldn't erase the obsession. When he looked at young EJ sleeping peacefully, he wondered, will he still have a father when he grows up? When he saw Andre from afar, he asked himself, will he have to face losing his father like so many others? And when he held Elisa in his arms, he trembled with the fear that one day his daughter might see him lying motionless. The early 1,990 seconds for Magic Johnson weren't just about battling medication. They were years engulfed by the shadow of death. He didn't live, he existed, and in that existence, every moment was a mournful melody, where the echo of the question, "Why me?" remained unanswered. In the early 1,990 seconds, as Magic Johnson lived under the shadow of death, medical science began to cautiously open fragile doors for HIV patients. While the disease was still seen as a death sentence, while his friends and teammates passed away one by one, the first antiviral drugs appeared, bringing a faint glimmer of hope. Magic clung to that light like a drowning man reaching for air. Each pill he swallowed wasn't just treatment, it was a prayer, a temporary contract, to extend his life by one more day, one more chance to see his wife and children, one more opportunity to prove he hadn't given up. For his body, those pills were no absolute miracle. They came with countless side effects: nausea, fatigue, insomnia, aching pains that ran through his body like blades cutting into flesh. Some mornings, he woke up not recognizing himself in the mirror, eyes sunken, skin pale, body worn out. But Magic knew this was the greatest fight of his life, and he had no right to surrender. He had won on the court before thousands of fans. Now he had to win in a dark room, with his only audience being the fragile thread of life hanging in the balance. Then came an unexpected opportunity. In 1992, just months after that fateful press conference, Magic Johnson agreed to play in the All-Star game. To many, it was unthinkable. A man with HIV, who had announced his retirement, returning to the court? The world was stunned, torn between hope and fear. When he stepped onto the court that day, wearing the familiar jersey, the crowd erupted in applause and tears. They didn't just see a player, they saw a warrior returning from the brink of death. Magic played with everything left in his body, every pass, every shot, as if pouring his entire existence into the ball. And when the final buzzer sounded, when he was named the MVP of the 1,992 All-Star Game, the arena exploded. Teammates, even those who had once been wary, rushed to embrace him. Michael Jordan beamed, Larry Bird patted his shoulder, and the court became a celebration of faith. It was a moment of raw emotion, when the world realized that HIV could ravage a body but couldn't kill the human spirit. Yet after that radiant moment, after the hugs and applause, Magic returned to harsh reality. His body was still weak, still reliant on medication, still collapsing in exhaustion after the game. Beneath the MVP glory, he was still an HIV patient, still trembling through pain, still taking pills on schedule like a prisoner counting days. Many nights, he clutched the pill bottle and cried silently. The world saw him as an immortal hero, but only he knew how fragile his life was. It was in that adversity that Magic Johnson began to see life differently. He realized he might not live long, but every day he had was a gift, and if given another chance, he would turn it into a mission. No longer about scoring points, but about actions to prove to the world that HIV couldn't extinguish hope. He began speaking openly about the disease, visiting schools, hospitals, and poor Black communities to share. HIV doesn't just target one group, it can touch anyone. But we can live, we can love, we can hope. Magic knew his image carried more weight than any article or medical study. He was a superstar, an icon, a man once celebrated by America. And now, with HIV in his body, he stood up to say that those with the virus weren't despicable, weren't doomed beyond salvation. Every word he spoke, every forced smile, became spiritual medicine for millions of other patients, people who had lived in darkness, who had wanted to end their lives in despair. From living with the guilt of being a survivor, Magic began to see the meaning of his existence. He wasn't living for anyone else, but he lived to prove to all that life could go on, even when darkness surrounded it. If he once played for championships, now he fought to reclaim dignity for millions abandoned by society. And that, more than any trophy, made Magic Johnson an immortal legend, not just on the court, but in the battle against a disease that once terrified the world. After his radiant return at the 1992 All-Star Game, Magic Johnson knew his professional basketball career was over. His body could no longer endure the grueling seasons, and HIV reminded him daily of life's fragility. But Magic refused to let his light go out. If he couldn't weave magic on the court, he would bring it to another stage, the world of business. Many doubted him. They had seen countless sports stars fade after retirement, squandering fortunes, losing their shine. For a man with HIV, labeled a walking death sentence, the business world seemed even more unrealistic. But Magic proved them wrong, once again. He founded Magic Johnson Enterprises, an empire built not just to make money but to create opportunities for communities society had overlooked. Communities like the one he came from, Black neighborhoods, impoverished streets, places where few dared to invest. He partnered with Starbucks to open stores in working-class areas where no one had thought to sell premium coffee. He invested in building modern movie theaters in poor neighborhoods, bringing entertainment to those left on the margins. Magic once said, "People think Black or poor communities don't need Starbucks or movie theaters. But I grew up in Lansing. I know we deserve nice things too." Gradually, those investments blossomed. Magic Johnson Enterprises became a symbol of success for Black entrepreneurs, valued at billions of dollars. He went further, entering sports ventures, becoming a co-owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers, MLB, one of America's most storied baseball teams, the Los Angeles Sparks, WNBA, continuing his connection to women's basketball, Los Angeles FC, MLS, a new symbol of American soccer, and most recently, he joined an investment group to buy the Washington Commanders, NFL, stepping into the world of football. From a boy called Garbage Man, from an athlete seemingly doomed by HIV, Magic Johnson became a billionaire, one of the most powerful figures in global sports business. People saw him as the embodiment of the American dream, vibrant and inspiring. He not only broke racial barriers, but turned a death sentence into a springboard for a second life. Yet behind the multi-million-dollar deals, behind the smiles at business press conferences, there was another Magic Johnson, a man living with the constant dread of death. He could sit in a luxurious office, surrounded by project plans and massive figures, but the old question still echoed in his heart, is today my last day? Despite having it all, fame, wealth, respect, he couldn't shake the fragile feeling, knowing each morning still required antiviral pills to sustain his life. Sometimes, as Magic left a meeting, stepped into his car, and looked out at the city streets, memories flooded back. The poor Lansing neighborhood, the days collecting trash with his father, the tears after the HIV press conference. He knew everything he held could vanish in a moment. Death still lurked, and wealth was no absolute shield. That very dread made Magic a different kind of entrepreneur. He didn't just calculate profits, he weighed the value left behind. Every Starbucks opened in a working-class area, every movie theater built where others had scorned, was a message. I survived, and I want my life to mean something. In every project, people saw a Magic Johnson not just chasing profit, but seeking to resolve survivors' guilt by giving back to the community. Magic's business empire was proof that a person could fall and still build a castle from the ashes. But for him, it was never just a castle to flaunt. It was a fortress against fear, a shield for his family, and the only way he could feel death hadn't yet reached him. He once said in an interview, "Money can't buy life, but it can help me give life to others." From the death sentence of 1,991 to his billionaire status today, Magic Johnson rewrote his fate. But even in that dazzling success, he remained the man who cried alone in the dark, the HIV patient living with medication, the father afraid that one day he wouldn't be there to see his children smile. And it was that struggle, between glory and darkness, success and dread, that made Magic Johnson unique. An entrepreneur born from ashes, a man who never stopped fighting to turn pain into a legacy. From his successful business ventures and powerful billionaire status, Magic Johnson understood that his life couldn't be confined to contracts and buildings bearing his name. He had stood at the pinnacle of basketball, tasted the glow of fame, and plummeted to the depths of despair when he heard the three fateful words, "You have HIV." That experience made him see clearer than anyone that money or championships weren't the ultimate legacy, but rather the ability to turn his personal tragedy into hope for those struggling out there. From that realization, the Magic Johnson Foundation was born. From the outset, the foundation had a clear mission: raise awareness about HIV divided by AIDS, provide free testing, and support treatment for the hardest-hit communities, especially Black communities and impoverished areas lacking access to health care and education. Magic didn't just lend his name to the cause, he personally went to schools, hospitals, and churches, standing before hundreds, thousands, to share his own story. He didn't shy away from recalling the painful moment he received the devastating news, or hide the tears he shed, so that HIV patients would know they weren't alone. In every speech, Magic carried his trademark optimistic smile. He spoke of hope, love, and how this disease didn't define a person's worth. The image of a basketball superstar, a billionaire, standing on a podium openly admitting he was an HIV patient, became a weapon more powerful than any ad campaign. It melted the silence and fear. It forced society to confront and change its perspective. And because of him, millions dared to get tested, sought help, and believed they still had a future. Magic Johnson quickly became a global face in the fight against HIV stigma. He was invited to the United Nations, international medical conferences, where his name rang out as living proof that HIV wasn't the end. He shook hands with world leaders, spoke with scientists, and embraced anonymous patients trembling in clinics. His presence was a light in the darkness, a testament that even when society turned its back, someone still believed in your worth. But behind the stage lights, behind the thunderous applause, was a truth only those closest to him knew. Magic still lived as an HIV patient. He still took his pills on schedule, endured the nagging pain, the side effects that drained his body. Many nights, after a speech ended and the audience left, he returned to a quiet room, sat silently by his bed, hands trembling as he opened the pill bottle. Those tiny pills, which the world saw as symbols of hope, were to him a cruel reminder that death was never far away. Sometimes, Magic confided to close friends that he was afraid. Afraid of the pretense in the smile he had to wear for the public. Afraid that one day his body wouldn't withstand the medication. Afraid of leaving Cookie and his children behind. But then, each time he stood before the desperate eyes of HIV patients, each time he heard the choked sobs of families who lost loved ones, he reminded himself, "I'm still alive, so I must keep going." His personal pain became the fuel to turn his story into a beacon for millions. The Magic Johnson Foundation wasn't just a charity. It was proof that a person could turn a curse into a mission, transform a death sentence hanging overhead into a reason to live more meaningfully. In every activity, every dollar he invested, people saw a Magic Johnson who wasn't just a billionaire or a basketball legend, but an ordinary man, hurting, vulnerable, yet determined not to let his pain be in vain. And perhaps that truth was the strength that made his legacy transcend sports or business, becoming a story of courage and humanity, living forever in the hearts of millions who found hope in his darkness. The years Magic Johnson poured his heart into the foundation and became a face against HIV divided by AIDS stigma were also years he faced relentless loss. The world still looked at him with admiration, a symbol of resilience, proof that HIV wasn't the end. But behind the smiles on stage and confident handshakes, Magic often went from one funeral to another. Friends from his youth, colleagues in entertainment and sports, one by one fell to HIV, divided by AIDS. Some were barely in their 30s, younger than he was when he received his diagnosis. Some were building brilliant careers only to vanish suddenly. Some had promised to fight the disease alongside him, but soon after, Magic had to bid them farewell in a closed casket. An entire generation vanished quietly. Artists, community activists, faces of the LGBTQ movement, young black men in poor neighborhoods, all reduced to cold statistics in disease reports. Magic witnessed this not through a TV screen but with his own eyes, through farewell embraces, through tears falling on his shoulder. Each time he heard of another acquaintance's passing, he sank, his heart wrenching as if losing a part of himself. And with each loss, the haunting question grew louder. Why am I still alive when they're not? It wasn't just a question. It was a sentence on his soul. Magic felt the weight of being a survivor bearing down on him. He was granted the chance to keep breathing while so many others weren't as fortunate. In quiet nights, he thought of them. Smiles that had faded, dreams that never took shape, lives that should have stretched far longer. He saw himself as a ghost wandering through a cemetery of memories, where friends' names were now carved only on tombstones. At each funeral, he didn't just mourn the departed, he wept for himself, the one left to live in emptiness. Some mornings, Magic woke to sunlight streaming through the window, but instead of seeing a new day, he saw irony. Why am I still here? He asked himself. When he swallowed his antiviral pills, he felt them as a lifeline tethering him to existence, yet also as chains binding him to dread. Each pill reminded him he was alive, while others never got the chance to take a single dose. Every day he lived was a day he carried an unanswered question on his shoulders. Especially in the black community, HIV divided by AIDS stole an entire generation. Many of his childhood friends, those who once played streetball with him in Lansing, were later diagnosed with HIV and quickly succumbed, lacking access to health care. Magic attended memorial services in local churches, watching aging black mothers weep dry tears beside their sons' coffins. He stood silently, his heart aching, knowing he could have been one of those lying in those caskets. The fact that he still lived, still breathed, still smiled, made him feel he owed an invisible debt to those who had gone before him. Years later, when his business and philanthropy had secured his place, Magic still carried this guilt. In interviews, he sometimes revealed his weariness. I've lost too many friends. Sometimes I think I survived just to witness more pain. Those words weren't complaints, but a poignant confession from a man who knew that survival could also be a burden. For Magic, surviving wasn't always a victory. It meant he had to remember all those who fell, to bear the responsibility of fighting for them. And that was a silent tragedy. He was never allowed to live just for himself. In every decision, every project, every speech, the voices of the departed echoed in his ears. You must keep going. You must live for us. That urge drove him to never slow down, to never give up. But it also meant his heart was never truly at peace. An entire generation of friends and colleagues vanished in sorrow, and Magic Johnson, America's immortal basketball hero, stood in that vast emptiness, both a witness and a haunted survivor. He turned that pain into a drive to help his community, but deep down, the tormenting question lingered. Why am I still alive when they're not? And perhaps that question would follow him to the end of his days, a scar that never heals in his tragic yet resilient journey. At 66, Magic Johnson is no longer the young man who soared across the hardwood of the Staples Center, nor the invincible hero in the eyes of fans. His body has endured decades of battling HIV, medication, and countless anxious nights. Yet strangely, it's at this age, when strength wanes and the shadows of age and illness loom, that he has found a peace and happiness he never felt in his youth. Each day for Magic remains a fight. He wakes in his quiet Beverly Hills mansion, but instead of preparing for a game or a press conference, he starts with therapeutic exercises. Health experts have designed a strict regimen for him: Pilates to keep muscles flexible, light cycling for cardiovascular health, and breathing exercises to steady his mind. His body is no longer robust. His back sometimes aches, his knees creak climbing stairs, but he persists. I have to fight every day, he once admitted, because if I give up for one day, I might lose the rest of my life. Alongside exercise, Magic's diet is so strict, some might call it ascetic. Gone are lavish feasts, hard liquor, and indulgent meals. His table now holds greens, grilled fish, low-salt, low-sugar dishes, all closely monitored by doctors. He takes his medication faithfully, pill by pill, hour by hour, like an unskippable ritual. Those small pill bottles have been his companions for over 3 decades, a reminder that his life persists through iron discipline. Looking in the mirror, he sees time's toll: silver-flecked hair, skin no longer taut, a body no longer firm. But instead of fear, he smiles in acceptance. For Magic, every wrinkle is a mark of survival, every gray hair a victory over death. Yet, in that calm, an unquenchable fear persists. It's the fear of mortality, of not seeing Cookie's smile again, of not holding his children's hands. In quiet evenings with his family gathered, he often gazes long at their faces, as if etching every detail into memory. He once confided, "What scares me most isn't death, but not being there when they need me." That worry never fades, even after living healthily for over 30 years since that fateful day in 1991. It's a silent reminder that his life hangs by a fragile thread. But at 66, Magic Johnson is happier than ever. His family, once rocked by illness, prejudice, and crises, is now his strongest anchor. Cookie remains by his side, as always, her hands still his harbor. Andre, his eldest son who once felt distant, is now grown, a friend and business partner. EJ, his openly gay son, strides confidently in the fashion world, and Magic is no longer the confused father but a proud one. Elisa, the adopted daughter who nearly lost her life in a home invasion, now shines as proof of resilient life. They, the Johnson family, are the embrace that keeps Magic standing when darkness surrounds him. Magic's legacy is clearer than ever. Black children in poor neighborhoods can now walk into movie theaters he built, sip Starbucks he brought to their streets, or dream of becoming athletes because his image still blazes in NBA history. HIV patients worldwide look to him and know they too can live, love, and dream. At 66, Magic knows he's leaving behind not just championships or billions, but faith, the most precious asset. His body may be frail, but his soul has never been stronger. Each morning, he exercises, takes his pills, fights his illness. Each evening, he sits with family, sharing stories, laughing, watching his children grow. In every moment, he feels deeply that life is no longer a race but a miracle. Magic Johnson at 66 is no longer the soaring athlete, but a man who has walked through fire, blood, and tears to stand here, frail in body but unconquered in spirit. From a boy mocked as garbage man while helping his father collect trash in Lansing, Michigan, Magic Johnson crafted an epic saga of tragedy and triumph. That boy once hung his head in shame clutching trash bags, but with an orange basketball, he soared to heights that made the world look up. From a childhood of poverty, he rose to 5 NBA championships, 3 MVP awards, became the soul of the Showtime Lakers, and one of basketball's greatest. Yet, Magic's legacy was never just in stats or trophies. It lies in the scars he bears, in battles unseen, in a life fate seemed to end too soon. On the 7th of November 1991, when Magic announced his HIV diagnosis, the world was stunned. For many, it was the end. But for him, it was a new chapter, the most tragic, yet most defiant. From a man seen as a living death sentence, he stood up, swallowed tears to smile for the public, and quietly fought through nights of medication, side effects, and listening to his heartbeat in fear. From personal tragedy, he forged a community mission. The Magic Johnson Foundation was born, bringing testing, treatment, and hope to millions. He refused to let HIV be a curse, turning it into a weapon against stigma. While many friends and colleagues fell, Magic stood, surviving. But survival was its own pain. He often asked himself, "Why am I still alive when they're not?" That question haunted him for years, but instead of letting it kill his soul, he used it as fuel to keep going. Every HIV patient who accessed treatment through his foundation, every child in a poor neighborhood who entered a movie theater or sipped coffee in a place once deemed not for them, was an answer to that guilt. He lived not just for himself, but for a generation that lost its chance. At 66, Magic Johnson has become a billionaire, a savvy investor, a devoted husband, and father. He holds stakes in the Dodgers, Sparks, LAFC, and Commanders, leaving his mark on 4 of America's biggest sports. But when speaking of his legacy, he rarely mentions billion-dollar deals. He talks about family, about Cookie, the woman who stood by him through the ultimate nightmare, about Andre, the eldest son once distant but now reconnected, about EJ, the son who bravely came out, and about Elisa, the adopted daughter who overcame trauma to thrive. That family is proof that love is stronger than prejudice, and it is his greatest legacy. To America, Magic Johnson embodies a truth. Glory may fade, but resilience in darkness is immortal. His magical passes and legendary plays will remain in highlight reels. Championships will become statistics in history. But the image of a black man with HIV, living healthily for over 30 years, still smiling, still uplifting his community, will endure as an endless source of inspiration. He was once a poor boy despised. He was once a star pitied by the world. But now, he is proof that no matter how cruel fate may be, it cannot defeat a resilient heart. Magic Johnson turned pain into strength, tragedy into legacy, and his life into a story that gives millions hope. Looking back at his journey, we see not just an NBA legend or a billionaire entrepreneur, but a human, frail, suffering, yet unyielding. His legacy isn't just 5 championships. It's the millions of lives saved through the hope he sowed. His legacy isn't just past glory. It's a message for the future. Even in darkness, humanity can find light. When Magic Johnson smiles at 66, It's no longer the smile of an undefeated young superstar, but that of a man who has weathered storms, endured darkness, and found strength in love and faith. And that is true immortality. For in the end, titles, wealth, and stage lights fade. But Magic Johnson's resilience, compassion, and spiritual legacy will live on, a flame that never dies in America's heart. Through his entire story, I see in Magic Johnson a pure sorrow of a man pushed to the brink by fate, yet choosing to stand tall. From the Lansing boy called Garbage Man while helping his father collect trash, to the Michigan State student who defeated Larry Bird in the 1979 NCAA, then becoming the soul of the Showtime Lakers with 5 championships and 3 MVPs, that is the arc of glory America admires. But on the 7th of November 1991, when he calmly announced his HIV diagnosis and retirement, we saw the fragile human. Behind the smile were long nights of medication, the question, "Is today my last day?" The survivor's guilt as friends in the Black and LGBTQ communities fell one by one. The greatest pity wasn't the trophies left behind, but that he had to relearn how to be a husband and father. Cookie, pregnant, stayed and tested negative, a miracle. Andre grew up distant, carrying a gap. EJ came out as gay, forcing Magic to shed prejudice for love. Elisa nearly died in a home invasion. Each family crack mended with responsibility and tenderness. From the 1,992 All-Star, MVP, to the Magic Johnson Foundation. From Starbucks and theaters in poor neighborhoods to the Dodgers, Sparks, LAFC, and Commanders, he used his brand to invest in places America often forgot. The lesson for Americans today: sports glory may fade, but fighting stigma, expanding healthcare, investing equitably in communities, and loving children for who they are, that's true national strength. At 66, each ARV pill, each disciplined workout, reminds us that the will to live is stronger than any sentence. Glory fades, but resilience in darkness makes a person immortal. If you're moved by Magic Johnson's journey from tragedy to immortality, please subscribe to join us in spreading more inspiring stories. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next video to celebrate those who turn darkness into light.